In a world overshadowed by nuclear ambitions, rising tensions, and global uncertainty, India once again stands tall with a message that echoes peace, strength, and strategic wisdom. In the grand halls of the United Nations disarmament meeting, India reaffirmed its no-first-use nuclear policy, a stance not born out of weakness, but of immense confidence, discipline, and responsibility. This declaration might sound simple, but behind it lies decades of strategy, moral vision, and a commitment that separates India from the rest of the nuclear powers. Picture this moment. Delegates from around the world seated under the shining UN emblem. Words of caution, diplomacy, and rivalry fill the air. And then the Indian representative speaks, calm, clear, composed, reaffirming that India will never be the one to start a nuclear war. The message is firm. India's nuclear weapons are not tools of aggression, but instruments of deterrence. They exist not to threaten the world, but to ensure that no one threatens India. This policy, once again declared to the world, sends ripples across capitals from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Islamabad. Because when India speaks, the world listens, especially now when the balance of power in Asia is shifting, when alliances are fracturing, and when the race for military dominance is heating up like never before. India's no-first-use policy is not new. It was first declared after the 1998 nuclear tests under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, when India officially became a nuclear-armed nation. But what made India different even then was the moral compass guiding its strategy. At a time when many nations flaunted nuclear might as a symbol of intimidation, India declared restraint. It said, yes, we have nuclear weapons, but we will never use them first. We will only respond if we are attacked. That single statement changed the perception of India on the world stage. It showed that this was a civilization rooted in dharma, in balance, in the philosophy that power must be guided by ethics. Fast forward to today, the world has changed dramatically. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has reignited fears of nuclear escalation. China continues to modernize its arsenal. The United States is expanding defense partnerships in Asia. Pakistan, India's neighbor, remains unpredictable with its nuclear doctrine. In this environment, India's reaffirmation of its no-first-use principle is not just diplomacy. It's a declaration of who we are as a nation. It's India telling the world our strength is disciplined, our power is controlled, and our vision is peaceful. But make no mistake, no first use does not mean no response. India's nuclear doctrine is built on credibility. The message is clear. If anyone dares to threaten or attack India with nuclear weapons, the response will be massive, decisive, and devastating. This balanced restraint paired with readiness is what gives India's policy its unique credibility. It's peace backed by power, calmness backed by capability. At the UN meeting, the timing of this reaffirmation couldn't be more significant. The global narrative is shifting once again. Major powers are testing their limits. New technologies, hypersonic missiles, AI-driven weapon systems, and cyber warfare are redefining security itself. Amid this, India stands as a pillar of stability. The reaffirmation is a reminder that India's vision of security isn't just about protecting borders. It's about protecting humanity from self-destruction. Imagine the reaction in world capitals after India's speech. In Washington, policymakers see it as a reassurance that India remains a responsible nuclear state. A key reason why the U.S. sees India as a strategic partner in the Indo-Pacific. In Moscow, Russia views India's stance as one that strengthens multipolar stability, aligning with its own calls for balanced deterrence. In Beijing, the reaction is more complex. China knows that India's no first-use doctrine mean India won't act decisively if provoked. The message to China is subtle yet powerful. India is not seeking war, but it is fully prepared for it. In Islamabad, the reaffirmation sparks debate. Custom, which has refused to adopt a similar policy, continues to rely on ambiguity. But India's consistency year after year government after government builds international trust. While others talk about peace, India acts on it. Let's not forget, this reaffirmation also sends a message to India's own citizens. It's a reassurance to 1.4 billion people that their government seeks peace, but never at the cost of national security. It's also a reminder to the world that India's rise as a global power is anchored not in aggression, but in ancient values of coexistence and restraint. This is soft power meeting hard power diplomacy supported by deterrence. To understand how powerful this moment is, we have to look at the global context. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT, remains a cornerstone of global disarmament. Yet many nations outside it, including India, have proven to be more responsible than those within. India has never signed the NPT, not because it doesn't believe in disarmament, but because the treaty itself is discriminatory. It divides the world into nuclear haves and have-nots, but India has always said, we don't need a treaty to be responsible. Our track record speaks for itself. No accidental launches, no reckless threats, no unauthorized transfers of nuclear technology. Compare that to the record of some NPT members, and India stands taller. At the UN, India's reaffirmation also reignites the conversation about global disarmament. Many nations pay lip service to peace while investing billions in modernizing nuclear arsenals. India's message challenges this hypocrisy. Says if a nuclear-armed country like India can commit to not striking first, why can't others take similar steps? Why can't there be a global doctrine of restraint? In that sense, India's policy becomes not just a national doctrine, but a global example. This policy also reflects India's faith in diplomacy. When India talks about deterrence, it's not just military. It's diplomatic deterrence too. It's about building relationships strong enough that conflicts never escalate to that level. From dialogues with the United States and Russia to the delicate balancing act with China, India's foreign policy today is a masterclass in equilibrium. The no first use doctrine aligns perfectly with this. It's strength with patience, power with peace. And yet, some critics argue that in a world where others might strike first, India's restraint could be risky. But India's leadership has always believed that moral authority is also a form of strength. The doctrine doesn't mean India is blind to threats. It means India refuses to let fear dictate policy. The credibility of India's deterrence lies in its ability to deliver, and the world knows that capability is unquestionable. For ordinary Indians, this reaffirmation carries emotional weight. It means that while India continues to grow economically, technologically, and militarily, it does so responsibly. It means the world can trust India not just as a partner, but as a leader in shaping a safer planet. For young Indians watching this on news channels, it's a reminder that their nation stands on principles that are both ancient and futuristic. Ancient, because the belief in nonviolence runs through India's veins since Mahatma Gandhi. Futuristic, because responsible nuclear policy is the only way humanity can survive the 21st century. India's reaffirmation at the UN also strengthens its diplomatic image ahead of critical global engagements. The G20, BRICS, the UN General Assembly, and various defense partnerships. Nations are constantly evaluating who they can trust in an age of shifting alliances. With this move, India reinforces the perception that it is not only strong but stable, not only modern but moral. When the Indian delegate concluded the speech at the UN, it wasn't just words spoken into the air, it was a message written into history. A message that India's rise will never be built on the ashes of destruction, but on the foundation of peace through strength. The applause that followed was not just diplomatic courtesy, it was respect earned through decades of consistent behavior. Now imagine how this statement plays back home, in think tanks, in classrooms, in the media debates, reignite. Should India stick to no first use, or should it evolve? But the beauty of this policy is that it's flexible enough to adapt while staying grounded in principle. It leaves room for review, but the core message remains unshaken. India does not believe in striking first. But it will always strike back harder if provoked. In the end, India's reaffirmation isn't just about nuclear policy. It's about leadership. When the world seems ready to choose chaos, India chooses clarity. When others flex muscle, India flexes discipline. Okay? That's what makes the country different. A global power that believes in both peace and preparedness. As the UN meeting disperses, as the cameras fade, and as headlines scroll across the world, one truth becomes clear in an age of nuclear anxiety. India's voice remains a beacon of hope. The no first-use policy isn't just a statement. It's a philosophy, a doctrine, and a promise to its people, to its neighbors, and to the planet itself. India reminds the world that true power doesn't come from the ability to destroy. It comes from the wisdom to choose restraint, even when you can destroy. That's the difference between fear and respect, between arrogance and authority, between a superpower and a civilizational power. India chooses respect. India chooses authority. India chooses peace with strength. And as long as that choice remains, the world can sleep a little easier. Because somewhere in New Delhi, under the watchful eyes of scientists and strategists, sits a nation that could strike first but chooses not to. That is not weakness. That is civilization at its strongest.